Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to take you to the fascinating world of the early 20th century and more specifically to this book, which was published in 1910 by a certain Mr. Gottfried Galston. This book fits into a certain pattern that we see with other early 20th century sources as well. This transition of the 19th to the 20th century would still like more than echoes of whole beat. We're going to dive into that, listen to some Chopin music because will be the focus of this video. I'm going to read some passages of this book. But first, I'm going to say a word to you because we are in the midst of our new Kickstarter, Beethoven's Complete Keyboard Works. And I have to say to you, it's going really, really great. It's the best launch we've had so far, even better than the symphonies. So a big shout out to all of you who already supported that on Kickstarter. And now I could ramble on forever how great this box is, the music and the way it's played, and also of course the tempo. But not gonna do that. You hear a piece playing in this background. So if you can figure out what piece that is and you leave it in the comments, and you support us on Kickstarter. So you have your name on Kickstarter, and here in the comment box with the correct composition, I'm happy to add a Beethoven 5th Symphony to you, signed by Alberto and me on top of the Beethoven Complete Keyboard Works. And by the way, the piece you hear in the background right now, can imagine, I would suppose that many of you have never heard of that piece before, but that's one of the unique points of this project, that not only you will hear all the pieces played in the WBMP in another tempo, but you will also hear a lot of pieces that are completely new in the same kind of tempo, but which will sound completely normal and even on the fast side. Why? That's because you don't know the pieces. Known pieces that you've heard many times before will indeed sound slower when we play them, but pieces that you don't know or are equally great. If you've never heard before, when we play them in the WBMP, the reaction is always the same. They sound absolutely normal. So figure out what piece is playing in the background, leave it in the comments with your name, go on Kickstarter if you haven't supported us there already, buy the product, and then when we have that match, you will get this CD in a signed version on top of the Complete Keyboard Works. And now, without further ado, back to Mr. Galston. So without further ado, let's dive into the world of Gottfried Galston, and then I will introduce also my point in a second. I had no idea who this guy was. He was born in 1879, died in 1950. That's very interesting. Born in the late 19th century and just like smelled a little bit of this origins of what we are talking about here. He had a very impressive resume here. He studied apparently with Karl Reinecke. His book is still here, Karl Reinecke, Die Beethovenschen Klaviersonaten. So Reinecke takes us back quite deep into the 19th century, Leipzig school, that type of stuff. And so Theodor Lisztinsky, so that also goes back through some generations to Karl Czerny, so the Viennese school. So this guy has some credentials that are really impressive. And so what actually did he talk about in his book? He talked about Bach, he talks about Beethoven, and he talks about Chopin. And we're going to have a look at Chopin. The section on Chopin starts with the preludes, but then we skip to the etudes, which is interesting for our search for the original reading of the metronome, right? Because of the etudes of Chopin, some of them, I would say quite a portion of them, today pianists can reach those in single beat. But as I said before, the Chopin etudes, if you compare those works with other etudes written in that time, Alcon, Thalberg, Liszt, you name it, they're actually moderately difficult. They are considered to be so difficult today because of the misreading of the metronome. By increasing the speed, by doubling the speed compared to what Chopin had in mind originally, of course, you can take every piece to a degree that it becomes almost unreachable for anyone. But because of the fact that Chopin's work, as fascinating as they are and as brilliant as they are to master a certain technique, are not among the most difficult pieces written in the 19th century, some pieces still are possible in single beat today. But this Mr. Galston, he makes some remarks about metronome marks by Chopin. Many instances he corrects Chopin's metronome marks, but not by much. He goes sometimes a little slower, but most of the times a little faster, which is, of course, adding something on top of what already is problematic or seen as problematic today. Because let's face it, Chopin's metronomization is in the center of every discussion about Chopin technique. Even if people do not literally talk about it, it are those metronome marks that drive musicians to play as fast as they can because they want to meet those metronome marks. And here we have in Opus 10 number 2, which is the A minor etude, this is a piece that people can play in 144, especially on a modern piano, I would say, with the use of the pedal. So they actually create a kind of legato feeling with the pedal, but also on a period piano, this is possible in a very fast tempo. But not so much faster than that, because this etude is considered generally to be one of the maybe not most difficult etudes written by Chopin, but in order to maintain that speed with the tension in the right hand, it's very hard. So 144, if you can manage that, that's a hell of an achievement technically, I would say. But what does our friend Galston says? It's in German, so I will translate on the go. It's not so important to literally, you can read the book and you can find it easily on Google Books if you want to check it out. But he says, this is meiner Ansicht nach die schwerste aller Chopinischen Etüden. So it's, according to my opinion, he says, this is one of the most difficult Chopin etudes. And he says, the faster you can play it, the better. There is almost no limit here. Es lässt sich kaum eine Grenze angeben, denn die Ausführung Metronom Quarternote 184 ist ganz gut denkbar und wäre zauberhaft. So he says, there is no limit to this piece. Okay, 144 for the very good professional pianist is not impossible, but then he said like, yeah, 184, that's just fantastic. And he's so fascinated by this idea of 184. Is like, if you want to try it, just play it in two hands if you cannot. So, okay. And then he says like, if you want to stick to Chopin's metronomization 144, like, yeah, for those amateurs, right? Well, then you have to be able to play it in 152 and 160 in Kammerlein beherrschen. So he means like in your study room, you have to go faster in order to meet 144 if you want to stick to 104. But like 184, that's the standard. Like this piece becomes like magic. So I have here a recording of Annick Göttler, and she plays in 144. So this is a technical achievement of the first class. So that goes pretty fast, right? 184 is if we move the tempo a little bit up, let's say 1.25. It's not exactly, but it's a little slower than 184s, but it doesn't matter. It's this tempo. You have to keep in mind, 144 is doable, but to maintain the speed, that's very hard. This guy writes a study book, and he said, like, yeah, you can stick to 144, but actually 184 is my standard. So I ask you now this question. I don't have the answer to that. So help me think. Go through this from a single beat perspective. If you would go to like a Chopin competition or a conservatory and say like, hey guys, we have news here, 184 is actually the tempo of this etude. And I think like many people would just get a heart attack. Or we say 1910, this guy actually read that metronome in whole beat. Then 184, according to the standards of today, Annick Göttler, this would be still pretty slow. Just saying. But it's not the end of the story. Before you jump to the comment section to say what kind of nonsense all of this is, wait for this. So it gives all kind of exercises here, and then it comes to Opus 10 number 3. And if we scroll to Opus 10 number 3 here in the first edition, the French edition, that's La Tristesse. So lento ma non troppo, 8th note 100. This is also a kind of mystery. Lento ma non troppo is by no stretch of the imagination a reflection of 8th note 100. And if you listen to modern performances, this piece is always, no exception, played in a tempo that's very close to whole beat. You have now pianists who try to push that a little bit because guess what? There is a metronome mark, 8th note 100, so we should speed it up, right? And if you go to Annie Guttler's performance, she plays this piece in around 8th note 60 to 70. So this is actually already one of the faster performances that you will find. This is a tempo around 70. She slows down to 60. She slows down even more. A kind of rubato, as if this was kind of the practice of Chopin's time, which was not the case. But anyways, very beautifully done in that style. But now let's read what Mr. Galston had to say about this. Ich spiele diese nocturneartige Komposition ein wenig schneller als angegeben, etwas Metronom Achtel 112. So he says, I play this nocturne-like style composition a little bit faster, as indicated, compared to the original indications, which in my case, I'm playing it, he says, in 8th note 112. Well, this piece is indicated 8th note 100. Well, I just was saying, everybody plays this like in 50 to 68th note. This is one of the whole beat performances in the Etudes bundle. So it's pretty remarkable, right? So we have here a recording of like say 70, and we can speed it up to meet about 112. We're still like at 1.75, still a little bit below that, but it doesn't matter. It just gives you impression. Not saying he didn't mean that, but it's all written from such an like self-explanatory, like obvious way. There is nothing that he needs to express, that he needs to explain. And by the way, if you look at contemporary editions, like for instance here, Grazia, he changed the metronomization of Chopin. Lento ma non troppo, 8th note 54. It's 8th note 100. Friedman. Talked about that before. I will make another video on Friedman. It's super important. 8th note 69. It's the tempo of Annie Guttler. But Chopin says 8th note 100. And Mr. Galston says 8th note 112. 8th note 112. You see where I'm going to? So I'm not saying that this Mr. Galston in 1910 wrote a book of which I'm absolutely sure that he was using the metronomization still in a whole beat way, but it leans into that direction very heavily. Now, if this would be the only source from that time that strongly suggests still applying a whole beat reading, then still it would be important, because how are you going to explain that? And again, go through the entire book, also the other sections on the etudes, you will find differences, not as big as this one. So only here, going so much faster in the 144 in the Opus 10 number 2, and also going faster even in the Opus 10 number 3, which like makes up this piece into like a very pleasant dance, you know, kind of not a lento ma non troppo, which for him like was a nocturne like thing. So this conflicts with this notion. There is something that's not right. But we have other sources like that. For instance, I can give you this example here. We talked about that before. Also there I need to make another video. But for instance here, we have Maurice Ravel, 1899. Pavane pour un enfant défunt, original metronome mark, quarter note 80. Ravel was criticized for his very slow play of this piece. Well, today you hear this piece by pianists like Richter, played in quarter note 40, but it's not the end of the story. What was his tempo in 1917 or something here? That's originally Ravel. quarter note 54. Quarter note 54. And now people will say, that's not half of this. No. If you read the entire story, he was criticized for playing his pavane way too slow. And then he made a new edition for orchestra, from which this metronome actually comes forth. And then, surprise, surprise, is quarter note 54. If you see or listen to the piano roll recording again, surprise, surprise again, what's the tempo of Ravel? It's quarter note 54. Of course, it's adjusted to that metronome mark. But how do you explain that? Also, we made years ago, and also that I need to redo in a better way, the discrepancy, so to say, between Max Reger, very famous organ composer, end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, with his good friend Karl Straube. Reger making editions of his works with metronome marks. Straube being the ultimate performer of his works. Close friends. They exchanged only, Reger was so happy with him. And then the Straube edition with metronome marks are almost or exactly in the neighborhood of half of the metronome mark speeds that Reger gave. And then Reger, also in the time where Ravel published his pavane for orchestra, also changed his metronomization to half of that. So all of this is a huge mystery, a huge conflict, unless you look back into history and say but these people in the 19th century had a different metronomization. And single beat, that modern reading, I've said it many times, existed from very early on. From the introduction of the metronome onwards, there was already an attempt, and not only just a few, there were major attempts to metronomize in single beat. I've made videos about that. The book will cover that extensively. It's not that we uncover all details of this story. That is a huge thing. You need universities and probably generations to study this. But the traces are there. From the 1820s, for sure, we have single beat metronomizations. Whole beat was dominant, though. There was a kind of natural translation of the pendulum. The left, right, the up, down was apparently ingrained. But then towards the 20th century, you have a more, this single beat notion became stronger, apparently. And then you have these composers and these musicians like Galston, who commented on music of the past, and they suddenly used the metronome marks. For us, very problematic. Again, Chopin. I said what I had to say about that, but just compare that to other metronome marks of the 19th century. It's not that we have not a few hundreds, it's not thousands of metronome marks that do not make any sense. And these people write about that there's nothing wrong with them. Chopin, I play it faster, 144. I mean, if you really want to play that, then make sure that you can play it in 160, right, in your study room to be safe on stage. What? And me personally, I play 184. Yeah, that is so, unbelievable. Or did these people just read and use the metronome in whole beat? I think the chances are very high. So, again, this video is not strong proof, but it's one of these elements, early 20th century, that is super fascinating. I'm convinced that when the book is published and some people, some musicologists or some students, doctoral students, whatever, professor, take it seriously and want to investigate, research this a little further, that when you go to the beginning of the 20th century, many things that are not just available or easy accessible, I would say, online. So you have to buy books, the letters. Some of these letters are not even published, to go to libraries and just do groundwork there, that in that period, you might find some really hard evidence. Just the composer, imagine we would have a letter by Ravel, probably not, because otherwise we would have had it already. It's not sure, because nobody actually read these letters from the perspective of finding something there in order to solve this mystery of the metronome mark. It's never been read like that, so you have to go through that material again. But imagine that one of these composers said to the publisher, no, I'm going to use this new way of metronomizing because it's so confusing otherwise. It might just exist. So, guys, that was it for today. I think it's an important source. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Also, Go and check out Patreon, free membership, or if you feel like I want to support this work because it's important, then by all means, the link is in the description box. The patrons are the backbones of this project. They enable me to spend so much time here on this research, also making this video for you. Again, that was all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.